So most of you are probably here because you saw our keynote demo this morning, where we integrated Timeline and Cinemachine for some live tailored mixed cast reality broadcasts. And we're going to dive into that in just a second. Before we dive in, I want to talk a little bit about cinematic VR, because this is a term that's kind of thrown around a lot loosely and no one really knows what it is. So I wrote this official description, so I don't know if that's what it really is, but that's what I think it is. And like I said earlier, there's so many different things that cinematic VR could be. It could be a VR film, it could be 360 video, or it could be kind of like what we showed you today, a game with cinematic cut sequences inside of it. So just any type of cinematic experience inside of VR where the user is playing a role in the story. So we're going to show you how to make something like that. My name is Sara again. I'm the VR AR evangelist at Unity. I'm super excited about cinematic VR. I actually studied film for a little bit before I got into VR, so I'm really excited that my worlds are finally colliding in this area.
I'm Mike Wuetherick. I'm a product manager with Unity. I'm working with the features teams that we call them. So that's animation, audio, the video stuff, and then Timeline has been one of my main focuses because it's such an important part and it brings such a new, crucial tool to the Unity suite.
So before we dive into the demo, I want to talk about a couple of my favorite cinematic VR experiences. This one here by Scatter actually just won an award, a Vision Award, for narrative design and best cinematic VR. So congrats to Scatter. And I believe that they are here showcasing in the Made with Unity showcase. I encourage you all to try it. I believe the reason that it won is because it was so unique. No one's ever told a story this way. Basically, they're telling the story of Stuxnet virus, and you become the virus in VR, and you're going along this like really linear story path, and you don't have a lot of interaction. You don't play a big role in the story, but you are the virus. Like how do you become a computer virus? I don't know. They did a really good job of making that happen. And I encourage you all to try it. Next example. All right. And Life of Us, we heard from Aaron and Chris in the keynote. This is just an amazing, amazing cinematic VR experience where you actually share the experience with someone else. And there is a lot of interaction involved, but you are on these rails as you're going through the experience, so you don't have too much freedom, and you're not going to like go off track and get lost in the experience. You're still going through something that was planned for you. And along the way, you might find these little hidden Easter eggs, like if you make a noise long enough, like fire will come out of your mouth as you're a dinosaur and stuff like that. So again, they're here at Vision. I encourage you all to try Life of Us if you haven't yet. And Asteroids. This actually won a Vision Award as well for Best VR Experience, so congrats to Baobab. And one of my favorite things about Asteroids is that the interaction plays such a huge part in the story. I'll explain a little bit later, but basically, the way that you interact with these characters actually changes the outcome. And it's really exciting. So all of those experiences were made using Timeline, which is pretty incredible because Timeline just came out, so they were using like a pretty unstable build of it. Yeah, and they really pushed the limits of what can be done with Timeline, full cinematic VR experiences. So for those of you that aren't completely familiar with Timeline yet, it is our new visual sequencing tool, and it's designed for artists so that artists can work more easily with developers and create these cinematic tracks without having to dive into the C# code.
So the main thing with Timeline is the whole idea of, again, bringing a familiar workflow to creating interactions or any sort of sequenced, time-based animation within Unity. So animation, we're building on the current animation keyframing workflow. We've enhanced it a bit. Dragging in existing animation clips that you create in your existing content tools, whether it's Max, Maya, you name it, So you can see with the color coding, it's basically different types of tracks. This top one is just existing root motion clips that we brought in. The second one is audio. We've got some custom playables. We'll talk a little bit about that. This one is keyframed, done right in timeline. And most of the animations that you saw this morning in the Mighty Kingdom demo were animated right within timeline. So we aren't bringing in animations from external tools. The animators or the artists jumped in and actually built some of those sequences, and we'll show you those in a sec. It's extremely powerful, and with almost no oversight, I just created the ability to trigger these sequences, handed it over to the artists, and then they created the animations by themselves. And it was just, yeah, it's awesome. It changes how you work with Unity. It's brilliant. And then from the engineering side, it's this simple. We have a component called the playable director, and all you're doing is calling stop, start, move to time. We treated, with the Mighty Kingdom demo, we basically treated timeline sequences like you would a node in your existing state machine. So instead of playing or setting a mechanism animator parameter, we're just playing different timeline sequences. Again, changes how you work with Unity. It's really liberating. No, that's basically the same slide. All right, so we'll just jump to a quick demo. So in the original scene, actually, let me just load that up for context. Brain working. Close, environment. So when we actually load up the main scene here, this is gonna probably do a whole bunch of stuff. Go away, Steam. We don't need you right now. Okay. So these little minecart animations, I didn't even know the artist added these in the scene. We were actually building the thing, and they just started adding details to it. And I came back later, and they had actually created their own animation sequences for this. So they keyframed the cart movement. These are just effects prefabs, so it's a game object with a particle system on it. And using timeline, it just creates a little looping sequence that spits out the particles. It's a couple of keyframes. In this case, it happens to be, they added a number of them for giving it a bit more flair. It comes out and does a little wiggle as it does the animation, but it's super easy and adds a lot of detail and a lot of ambiance to the world. So we can take a look at sort of the quick hacked version I did just before now. So this is a game object, again, with a particle system. Let me bring up the inspector a little bigger so that we can see it. Just your normal, what you would do to make a particle system. We have what we call animation or activation tracks. So this is an activation track here, and I'm just going to delete that track and re-add it back on. So when you drag a track down, it prompts you to create a track. So you can create animations, or if we wanted to keyframe it, or you can, in this case, create a Cinemachine track. We don't need to do that. We're just going to do an activation track, and all it's doing is setting the state of the game object. It's on or off. For the track, when it's playing, you also have a post-playback state, so you can have things that are active during the timeline sequence, and then you can set what you want to do with it afterwards. So the intro movie that played after we set the battle mode on, I'll show you that in a sec, all the characters that walked out, it's basically I'm just adding all these different ambient characters just for the purpose of that cinematic. After that's done, they're all just basically hidden and discarded. So they're just, again, ambient details that we're just creating dynamically. So in this case, again, we've got multiple particle systems and then keyframing that I've done right within timeline. We can also link it with the existing animation window. So I'll just dock this down here. When you're actually creating these, it synchronizes with the existing curve system, so you can work with the keyframing that's already there. So they're very complementary systems. One also interesting thing is you can create clips, so you can turn this into a reusable clip. So now that I've actually done that, I can copy and paste it. I can reuse it on other game objects if you wanted to. It becomes an actual reusable animation, the same as anything else. It's super, super powerful. So let me actually just create that from scratch. So we have our cart, which is the mine cart. and I'm going to lock the timeline on here. So right now, if I just hit play, all it's going to do is turn on particle effects when I hit play and when it actually wakes up. Come on, Unity. Go. Why are we not playing? All right. We're going to drag our cart down and make an animation track. I'll close that. So now that we've got the animation in, and you can see the particle icon coming on and off as this game object's activated. So we're on 0, so I'll just hit the keyframing button. So now we're in record mode. So for our cart anim, I'll just say we're going to start inside here, and we'll move out somewhere. Stay there for a little bit. Oh, wait, I should. And then just move back. So just for a simple version, we'll just do that. So we play it, stays out, goes back.
Not as flashy as the artist version.
No, no. That's why I'm an engineer and not an artist. So yeah, it's super powerful. And again, once you get actual artists involved, then you get really cool versions. So I'll load up the intro sequence here, which is a combination. We used a couple additive levels, so I'll just add the gameplay objects. So this one's a little bit more of a comprehensive timeline, but we can also we have track groups. So you can actually just add a track group, which allows you to organize your scenes. So this gives you the ability to combine multiple elements together. So here I have my camera and my audio and the Cinemachine stuff, which I'll show you in a bit. And in this case, what's going on here? Okay, see the reactions of stuff's going on. The scene 1, the castle fade, I've actually got some, this is a custom playable where I just do a simple fade in. The castle guards, again, I'm just basically turning on and playing an idle animation. Let me just find them in the scene. So I select it. Let's turn this on. So where are you, castle guard? So these are the guards in front of the castle here. Again, they just exist for the purpose of this timeline sequence. And then once it's done, I'll lock that. Once it's done, they'll go away. So we're just basically adding scenes to and in VR, these all are world space interactions that are going on. So when this intro sequence started playing, Sarah was seeing it in world space, which is, again, the core of creating cinematic VR. The interesting thing with this demo is we were trying to figure out what's an interesting way of tying cameras or camera animation into it. So we started adding some of the other layers. And I can talk about sort of how we put that together later on. So let's see, where are we at?
All right, well, thank you for showing us how to use Timeline. I encourage you all to start playing with it now. It is in experimental preview.
Yeah, so it's been in experimental preview for a little while. It's also in the 2017 1 beta. So feel free to try it. It's available today.
And regarding VR interactivity, so obviously in our demo we showed today, there was a lot of interaction. As I was building the world, I was triggering all of these timeline sequences. And that's the whole idea behind cinematic VR. The interactivity actually gives the user that sense of agency and presence, like they're involved in the story. Like I was the god or goddess of this kingdom, creating a battle as I go, and it created a really cool story. Like I mentioned before with asteroids, the story actually changes depending on the way that you interact. When you have the chance to save mac and cheese, if you don't help them right away, they kind of get a little mean, and they treat you differently. But if you help them, they love you, and they come up, and they're super happy to see you. And there's just little nuances like that you might not notice as a viewer, but when you figure it out, you notice that it's pretty awesome. So how are you actually going to enable this VR interaction? We mentioned before, it's really easy for engineers to call timeline. All you have to do is create a timeline component and called timeline.play. So you can call timeline.play pretty much anywhere that you want with any type of trigger or collision event or any regular event in Unity. In the Mighty Kingdom demo, all of the timeline sequences were triggered with colliders. So any physics-based collider, as soon as my building collided with the ground, it triggered that timeline sequence to play.
Yep. So one of the other parts is looking at your entire world as the UI. In the Mighty Kingdom as well, all of the units that are being spawned, we have hundreds of them. They're actually all part of just a toggle. So it's just like a radio button toggle. One of them can be active at any given moment, including the ground. So when we select the ground and get rid of the picture-in-picture pop-up, it's just actually setting that element of the toggle to be active. So when we're actually picking the different units to change the cinematic output, it's actually just the equivalent of choosing a toggle in a UI. Our entire world is the UI. With the God mode powers, the hammer, we were actually originally looking at, okay, we've got a volcano. Let's reach into the volcano and grab some fire. Let's reach into the cloud to grab the hammer. It's up to you to define what this medium means for you. We're actually creating this whole thing on the fly. No one really knows. The rules haven't been defined. That's the cool part about VR. We're building it with every new application.
And although timeline is pretty awesome in itself, you have animation tracks, audio tracks, activation tracks. You can also completely extend what timeline can do using custom playables. So playables are an API specifically for extending the functionality of timeline. And let's take a look at an example of one right here. All right, so this here is our navmesh playable. So this was used in the Mighty Kingdom demo to tell all of our villains and defenders, where they can go using a nav mesh. And we wanted that nav mesh to be a part of our timeline sequences.
So again, at the very beginning, we spawn all the bad guys. They all come rushing out of the gate. That's actually using this exact playable.
So we have a couple methods here that are a little bit different than our regular monobehavior methods. So we have onGraph start, and that's just called when the timeline starts. And then process frame is basically the update call for playables. So in here, we're just taking 3 inputs. We have our agent, our target, and our director. And then based on that, we're just setting a destination for our agent and a speed. And let's go ahead and show this in a quick demo. All right.
So right-click and additively load the environment.
Okay.
And then if you actually got something behind you.
Oops.
No, nav mesh demo.
Oh, right here. It's already loaded.
No, that's the timeline session.
Okay. Oh, there we go.
Now additively load that one. Right-click. Additively.
Got it.
There you go.
Alrighty. So here we have our navmesh target. So this is what we want our agent to be following around to guide him through our navmesh. So I'm going to take a look at my navmesh timeline here. And I have this navmesh playable track right here. So this track right here is the script that I just showed you all. Really simple script. All it does is takes in three items there. So let's go ahead and right-click on this.
Just open this.
Oh, there we go. All right, so I have a director in here, and the director is just calling this timeline, the actual director component of the actual timeline. And then we have a target. So we have our navmesh target. That's our little ball here. And then we have an agent. And our agent is right over here. So we just want to get this agent to follow our little ball. Go back to our timeline. All right. All right, so I've gone ahead and recorded a couple keyframes, and let's record a couple more with our target. So if I go ahead and hit record, I can see I already have a couple keyframes in here. I'm just going to go ahead and add a few more. The ball to come way out here. over there. Where's the ball now? Over here, I'll bring it over here. Let's just make this guy run all over the place. All right. So that looks good. Let me just stretch out my playable. In order to see it in action, I have to have it in play mode because the nav mesh won't actually run just from the editor here. And now we can see our little agent following the ball around, can move the ball, make him go back and forth. Poor little guy. So in just under a minute, I can integrate a custom script in a timeline and do some pretty cool stuff. Here's another quick example of a playable. This is an alpha sprite playable, and what this is used is just to fade in and out text. So we're taking in a sprite image, and on process frame, we are just adjusting the alpha value to make it have a nice transition of cinematic coming in, like when you saw the mighty kingdom come into the frame. You don't want it just pop in there all abruptly. You want a nice fade in cinematic feel. We already did that.
Yeah. All right. So now that we've got we've start torturing our goblin guy and make him run around, let's introduce you to Cinemachine. So Cinemachine, again, is our new procedural camera system. So I'm just going to add an actual camera into this scene because I don't actually have one right now. And if we go over to our game view, that's the default position. So I'm just going to add a brain to it, which is the Cinemachine central component. So Cinemachine adds what we call a virtual camera environment to Unity. Before Cinemachine, Unity had cameras, but we never actually had a camera system. So you can think of the virtual cameras that you add with Cinemachine as very lightweight virtual cameras that drive the main Unity camera. So to add one, I can actually just go and add a Cinemachine track, tell it which brain I'm using, and then just start adding shots. So the Cinemachine shots are targeted shots, and in this case, I can actually set virtual cameras around the world, but I don't actually know where the goblin's going to be because it's just chasing this nav mesh target. So I can tell it I'm targeting the goblin, and as he runs around, we want to keep him in a certain frame. So I have my shot. I've got this look at, so I want to look at, let's find somewhere in the character, probably his head somewhere. Somewhere in this hierarchy.
There he is.
Okay, so now you can see the angle immediately snapped to focus on the goblin. And if I just dock this over here, we're actually targeting the goblin now. So if I move our virtual camera, it's always going to keep the proper focus on this character, anywhere I move it. So even just now, if I hit play and let's extend the shot so it's the full length, he will follow the goblin. It's that easy. You can add as many of these virtual cameras within the scene, and it will automatically update. The animators can change the movement. For example, you can just scrub around, and it's going to keep that shot in focus. So for the gameplay, the elements where we're selecting the units, we actually have any number of shots that we've set up. We don't know where those units are going to be. We don't know what's around them. But we have a simple looping timeline sequence that's just saying head shot, close shot, wide shot, and it just is going between them and actually dynamically, procedurally building a movie for you. Adam Myhill, the creator of Cinemachine, that's his passion, is this idea of procedural cinematography. We're creating these shots dynamically, again, without knowing where they're going to be. So I can add another shot into the scene, create another virtual camera. So this immediately, as soon as we hit play, it just jumps from that one to cut to the other one. So now that I've got that, actually I'll just leave it in play mode because that's the cool thing is you can actually do this in play mode. So I have my other I deleted my virtual camera. Curse you, Unity. All right. So I'm going to tell this shot now to use my other virtual camera. And now I'll hit play mode. We're fixing that, by the way. Okay. Yeah, that in itself is worth clapping for. So, all right. I'm going to set my timeline, the playable director, to loop. So now it will just loop this whole sequence, and our poor goblin will run basically until he's blue in the face. The nav mesh.
Well, he's already green, so.
Well, he's a little green already, yeah. So now we have these two shots. While the game's running, I'm just going to adjust what my other shot is. Except I didn't tell it what he's looking at. So let's find him again.
There we go.
There. So now we have two cameras we're just cutting between based on where we are in the timeline sequence. Now, the really cool thing with Cinemachine is it not only gives you these hard constraints, but a composer. So what this allows you to do is say, what's the positioning? What's the actual shot I'm trying to get here? So for this one, I can pull up some lens attributes. I want this one to be a super telephoto. And I want him to be, I'm just going to actually pause it here. I want it to be a little bit more, I don't know, he's going to be focused over there. You can also set dampening. So dampening allows you to emulate a bit of handheld. So I can loosen the guides. Let's see, he's supposed to be over there. Let's, all right, that looks all right. I'm a terrible cinematographer, but we're just going to hit go on that now. Now we're just going to continually switch between these. You can have any number of these virtual cameras in your scene. Because they're very lightweight, they're essentially just driving the transform for your camera. So you can think of it as just updating the position rotation for the camera, the main Unity camera. Cinemachine does a billion things beyond this. He's got collision-based systems for chase cams. We showed at GDC some whole dynamic free look system if you're doing a third-person non-VR game. They have, he's got this concept of Cinemachine Cloud, which allows you to actually, for each of these takes I have here, so instead of shot 1 and shot 2, you can actually have multiple sub-shots, which I will show you in our actual units. So the units from the game, where are they? So for example, our heavy character here. We have a Cinemachine object, which if I set this, no, wrong one. Let's find a different one. No, it's the monsters.
Yeah, get a monster.
So for the heavy. So here he has a whole bunch of different Cinemachine cloud shots. And if I set this and the camera, so here we have a bunch of different zooms, a bunch of different wide shots, bunch of different telephoto. And you can see here with the Cinemachine cloud, there's actually multiple sub-shots. You can actually set priorities for these sub-shots. You're saying, I want a headshot, but I really like this one. But if it's occluded, or we're doing a ray cast to see it's behind collision geometry, it will actually bump to the next one down the list. And you can actually stack these so you can have any number of them in your scene. The other cool thing is you can just hit this randomized choice option, and it will actually just randomly pick one. So you're making a conversation system, and you can actually play it, and it's a different cutscene every single time you play. This is like beyond, it's like super, super cool and very fascinating. And they're coming up with new stuff every single day. Cinemachine 2.0 is about to be released on the Asset Store. It's a separate package, it's an add-on. You can try it today. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys can do with this.
Especially in VR.
Yes. So the final bit of how we're doing the streaming broadcast output for Cinemachine, if I jump back to our actual game, or the Mighty Kingdom demo, this gets a little out there, but we have a Cinemachine camera that's rendering to a render texture. So the VR camera is actually just your normal world space VR camera. The cinematic camera renders to a render texture. That render texture is just pasted on a UI canvas. So you can think of the camera layers. We have VR, your normal headset view. We have Mixcast, which actually overlays that to provide the mixed reality. And then on top of that, we have this UI texture which is the Cinemachine render texture. It's a super, super simple technique, and I can show you that fairly easily in one of the buildings. Let's look at our, I'll just grab the bunker because it's an easy one. Actually, let's put it in a new scene because this one's got all kinds of weird effects on it. So here we have the Cinemachine object. It's got a virtual camera set up for it. We actually have two canvases set up. One is a world space camera, which is actually your picture-in-picture mode. So this overlay actually pops up above the character in VR as you select it. The second one is just a normal screen space camera. And again, this is just rendering. It's a normal Unity canvas with a raw image element that's pointing at this render texture. As we're toggling, again, our world space toggle, we select the different units. We're just disabling and enabling this game object that says, turn on those canvases, turn on those canvases. Because Cinemachine's rendering to the same render texture, the performance is totally fine. We don't have millions of cameras rendering. It's one virtual camera, whichever one happens to be active. They're all rendering to the same render texture. It's a super simple technique that you could use today. There's nothing magic in what we're doing here. And then suddenly you're creating these dynamic procedural cinematics for your streaming audience, as well as these world space interactions for the VR user that's actually directing the game. They become the movie director while they're playing the game. It's super cool and kind of out there, but hopefully I look forward to seeing what people are able to do with this.
And we talked about that.
So, Cinemachine, Timeline are available. Both of them are out there today. If you go to unity3d.com/timeline, there's a forum. We've got people answering questions. Adam and myself are in there every day answering questions. We look forward to hearing from you. We definitely look forward to seeing what you guys do.
Yeah.
We're going to open it up for questions now. We've got about 10 minutes left. Just open it up to the floor.
Hi there. So the Cinemachine stuff looks pretty cool. I'm already kind of working on what you call cinematic VR for Airbus, and one of the things that I'm looking at is different ways for our audiences to be able to understand what is actually going on, but we want to present it a little bit differently beyond just showing what the user's seeing.
Yeah.
Okay? So I'm looking at Cinemachine, and I'm thinking, can I use that dynamic camera setup to create a more cinematic point of view of the user, of the actual guy with the headset on? And so, for example, if he's on a helicopter and he's on a search and rescue mission and he needs to jump into the water, can I set up those dynamic cameras to capture a different view to see the user doing something? You know,
Right. So you're thinking like popping to like a chase cam or something for a moment,
or like if I'm diving down, can I suddenly switch to a camera at the above the water to see him coming down, and those sort of scenarios, but then use that as the external view on my big screens and those sort of things.
That's exactly the kind of thing that we're doing here. And you can, in VR again, you can have them as a picture-in-picture. You can have it as a world space thing that's going on. You could have it as a relative offset from the player, so it's just kind of you can see what you're doing sort of floating out there. That's always the challenge with UI in VR, because you can't just actually make UI.
So it is possible to set up the new cameras to understand that the thing that they should be looking at is the VR camera that is the user. Or do you have to create a...
You just basically, within Cinemachine,
object?
you can have it just as a child of your...
Okay.
So the virtual cameras can just be, they're just game objects. You can add them anywhere within your scene hierarchy.
Okay.
So you could definitely have it as part of the, wherever, or just as an offset of the player. So you can set up like all your cinematic shots that are just parented to that VR player, to your parent sort of Steam character or Oculus, whichever system you're using.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
It'd be great to chat more about this if you guys
Cool.
got
Yeah,
time.
definitely. Come find us.
Cool.
I'm a relatively new developer, so this might be a simple question, but so now you have that raw image, it's the view. How is that being streamed out to the audience to see?
So here, let me see if I can show you. So if I load up the scene and hit play, so what we've got here, it's no different than adding a UI element to a game. So for our battle start, let's find our game controller, and we're going to set it into battle mode. And I'll just pause. So this has a canvas. No, this one, presentation. So again, we have a world space canvas, which if I zoom way out, you can see it. So this canvas, again, it's just a UI element with the raw image underneath it. So it's no different than creating, like in a normal game, you create a canvas, add a button, and it appears in front of the render order. So you can do the same kind of thing with your Cinemachine camera. So Cinemachine is seeing this layer, which is rendering out. In the VR camera, we just are set to not render that view. So this, in the actual VR world, let me just focus on this one. Jump in here. I actually created a picture-in-picture mode as well, which is, so in VR, you're actually seeing this picture-in-picture mode of the cinematic that's going on as well. So it's no different. I'm just basically, this one's a screen space overlay, this one is a world space one. So within the Unity canvas system, you can specify whether it's a world space UI element or a screen overlay. The screen overlay is what overrides the display output. So when you actually are running your game, this game window is what you normally see. That's not actually the same thing as what the VR user's seeing.
Yeah, but how's the audience seeing that?
So when you actually run your executable, normally in VR, like if I had a headset, this game view normally shows you the headset view. Because it's a screen space overlay, it changes the streaming output, but doesn't actually change the VR output. It's kind of a cool and interesting trick.
When you say audience, you're referring to the external audience, not the headset wearer,
Yes,
right?
the
Okay.
external audience. I mean, what are they, that screen, like when you were doing earlier today, we could see you and see the game.
Yeah.
What was the physical connection to make that happen?
Oh, so that's the system called Mixcast. So providing the green screen overlay and all that bit. So that's actually a third-party SDK. They have a talk tomorrow, I think on the same stage, where they'll actually bring out the green screen and do a complete walkthrough of how their mixed reality system works. So it's kind of the second layer. We've got our VR camera, then the mixed screen, green screen, which does actual dynamic live green screen overlays. They actually can position you within the 3D world and everything. And then we've got this cinematic view that sort of turns on and off over top of that. So yeah, come by tomorrow. I'm pretty sure it's 3:30. It's a whole overview of the history and world of mixed reality.
Hi, friends. This is a really tall mic. A lot of like Twitch streams and gamers now, when they're doing like massive multiplayer stuff or just team versus team, there's an announcer and they have like God control over everything. Is it easy to do that with this now, where they can show cutscenes and then go on to different characters and actually have like really nice virtual cameras onto all of these things when they're doing multiplayer like showdowns?
Oh, I wish Adam was here right now. He would love to answer
I'm just
your
like,
question.
that's all I was thinking of when you guys
So
were talking.
Adam has this vision of he calls it a Cine VJ, and it's exactly that. It's for esports broadcasting, giving you the broadcaster view of, I'm going to focus on character 1, character 2, character 3. Hey, these guys are doing some cool stuff. It's exactly meant for that kind of thing.
But
And
is it implemented yet?
it's in progress.
Okay, that's what.
Talk to us in a month. Thank you.
Excuse me. My question is about timeline. Are there limitations to what types of game objects you can use in timeline? Can you use like world space UIs and make animations with UIs and elements of UIs using timeline?
Absolutely. Essentially, anything that's an object within your scene, you can animate. So in our, is it the battle end
And
here?
can things be like nested and parented in ways in timelines, so they wouldn't necessarily show up in the same place twice, but they would be running their tracks
Yes.
in different places in the world?
Yeah, so essentially in, for example, our, where is it? So this gate spawn object, this is actually the giant spikes that came out of the ground when the battle starts. It's actually this whole nested hierarchy of X number of different VFX. They all get turned on at the same time when I just set that activation track. It's no different than calling from script like set active to this game object. It activates everything underneath it. So you can turn on and off whole hierarchies of objects. In this case, this battle start container and this game end one, this whole hierarchy and all the objects underneath it all get activated when that end sequence plays. So here's our the different cameras, and we've got our boss and the guy, the big demon guy that comes out of the gate at the end. It's actually turning that whole hierarchy on, and they're all referenced within the timeline. So it's super flexible and super powerful. And just by simply turning on and off game objects, you can do a whole bunch of stuff. So I don't know who is first.
You go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have a question about the timeline also. Will you be able to manipulate mesh through timeline? Kind of like in Speed Tree, you can essentially manipulate the skeleton, right?
So anything that's exposed in the hierarchy view, you could basically animate. You'll start to run, one issue right now is like if you had an existing animation, like an idle animation, the root motion system will override, or you'll end up with kind of fighting who's in charge. However, something we're adding, I think for 2017 too, is runtime filtering of your animation, similar how you do in the animator right now, where you can say lower body animation, upper body animation. So you can actually have a normal root motion animation, and then you want to add a wave to it or something. So we can actually start layering these kinds of animations on the fly. But if it's just if you don't have an existing animation right now, you could do a whole character animation system, like a walk cycle or something, if you were patient enough. And actually an animator, which I'm not.
And my second question is, does it support Playmaker? Because Playmaker is great for just fast prototyping. So
I think there's
for
nothing in timeline right now that would prevent them from creating their own Playmaker actions to trigger it. Again, it's just that whole idea of, okay, go through the node graph, timeline.play, wait for a callback from timeline to move on to the next state. Again, when we were building this, the whole idea was that we're actually treating them as different, instead of animations like just a normal idle walk run, we were actually treating them as each of the timeline sequences as an animation state. So it's, it is on the Playmaker sort of side. I'm sure the community will either create their own Playmaker actions or the Playmaker folks themselves will, but it absolutely is meant for that.
Yeah, I was just wondering about whether that was going to be fully integrated into Unity or not. Yeah.
Yeah, like all the third-party integrations like that are normally on the third-party asset to create, but there's nothing, like everything within Timeline is fully exposed. You can actually create new timelines from an API that's available. You can add new tracks. You can dynamically bind game objects on the fly. So for example, this Cinemachine track right now, it doesn't have a game object because it's actually a prefab that gets spawned. So I'm actually dynamically finding the brain, the Cinemachine brain in the scene, binding it. You can look up objects and then reconfigure the entire system. It's everything we're trying to do with Timeline, whether it's the playable system or the actual components, we're trying to make it so it's accessible from an API so you can extend it and build on it and create your own custom systems.
Cool. Thank you.
Is it possible to have screen transitions between camera shots? Like fading between shots or
Yes.
star wipes?
Let me go back to our NavMesh demo. So in this demo, let's add the environment back in.
Where is it?
Right here. Okay. So in our original demo, I created this system where it had the two cuts. This one here is still terrible, so I'm going to actually grab that second one and find a better shot.
You're such an artist.
I am super arty, let me tell you. All right. Okay, so 2 shots. So one of the really cool things with Timeline is it actually lets you create essentially custom mixers and custom extensions. So now that I've got this close-up shot and this shot, all I have to do is just drag them over, and then it actually does the blend. So all of our flying around the scene and everything that we're doing in that whole intro sequence is just shot, 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 blend, 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 and then it actually creates the whole fly-through sequence. It's the idea of these intent, Adam calls them intents, like I want a headshot, I want this shot, I want this shot. And then because it's just, they actually got the blending part for free because Timeline and the way the playable system works actually gives you all of that magic essentially for free. Because it actually is taking the transform of this camera, the first camera, and it actually blends the output of this, does all the math and everything. That's just part of the playable system when you create a custom mixer. And you can actually define what that mixer means for your individual shot. So if I go back to our prototype, the beginning one, and I hit play here, and let me just lock on the start timeline. All right, we got to wrap up here, but I'm just going to do this quickly. In here, we'll show our camera tracks. So this is actually a whole bunch of individual little tracks. So when I hit battle, that crane animation is actually a close-up shot and a far-out shot, and it's actually blending between X number of animations. So all of these close-ups. This pull-out here, I had one shot, and I just moved it to the other shot, overlapped them. The crane dollies, all the 2 shots, chase cams, I just parented it to the arrow as it flies away. It's super powerful, and I can't wait to see what you guys do with it.
Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Yes.
For those of you that have questions, find us later. Thank you. Make cool things with this.
Yes, we're super excited, and we can't wait to see what you guys do. Thank you very much.